Hello, and welcome to Talking Development. This week, government leaders and international partners are gathering in Rome to discuss Ukraine's future. Because now is the time to prepare for the Ukraine of tomorrow, a future centered on people and driven by the private sector. Despite facing immense challenges, the people of Ukraine have shown remarkable strength and extraordinary determination. And so have businesses in keeping the economy running. A central challenge today is advancing the reforms and the recovery in uncertain times to secure a peaceful and resilient tomorrow. And start with rebuilding and creating the conditions for a growing and inclusive economy. To discuss opportunities ahead, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by two World Bank colleagues, Asad Alam, who's the Regional Practice Director for Prosperity in the Europe and Central Asia region, and Shomek Lal, who's a Senior Advisor in our Office of the Chief Economist of the World Bank. Asad and Shomek, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Anna.
Great to see you both. And I'm going to start with this point of economic development needing to take place in the context of peace and security. And of course, today, Ukraine faces significant challenges because they do not have peace and security, yet they have to focus on their economy. What will it take to be able to have economic stability, or what has it taken despite the challenges that they're going through?
So thanks Anna for this conversation. You used the critical words peace and stability. But then even as we think and build towards that, there's a lot that Ukraine is doing and can do. And I think they can work to prepare the grounds for that better future that you are talking of, even now, even in this current environment, to make sure that institutions, that they start building and creating those institutions that would serve them best for the future. A second big area for them to do is to address some of those massive macroeconomic imbalances that have developed because of the war. But looking into the future, how can we actually do things, whether it is on the fiscal adjustment side, whether it is on rebalancing the real economy, moving from a consumption-based model, which is what over the last few years Ukraine has been largely focused on protecting the consumption. How can we move into a more investment-driven mode, a mode that actually promotes more export orientation? Human loss has taken place, both in terms of actual lives lost, but also the out-migration of the population and the dispersion of the population within the country. Labor and capital are absolutely important factors of production for the future of the country. And unless we build that stock of capital, it would be very difficult to actually look into the future. So I think these are some of the fundamental challenges that Ukraine faces right now.
Thank you so much, Asad. And they and we have a lot of knowledge about their pre-war challenges that still are very relevant going forward. Shomek, let me turn to you. The policymakers in Ukraine have to really think about both short-term and long-term at the same time. But how do you see the ability to do both for a policymaker that's going through this tremendous challenge of having to get through today, but also having to plan for tomorrow?
When we started working on Ukraine with the Kyiv School of Economics last year after we traveled there in November, a striking feature of the Ukrainian economy comes to bear. That over the past 25 years, Ukrainian per capita incomes have stagnated at 6% of the United States. We found an interesting dynamic among businesses in Ukraine. So in most growing economies, young firms, they start doing well, they get larger, they get more market shares, and the market leaders are getting more and more competition. In Ukraine, quite the opposite. In fact, the largest firms and the incumbent firms, they are hugely dominant in markets, and young firms are finding it increasingly difficult to get resources. So one thing for policymakers that have to be kind of central while they're doing short-term issues is to discipline incumbency. I'm not saying you vilify incumbents because they have the human capital and the financial capital, but they need to be disciplined so they don't block young firms from growing. The other point that seems really important, along with disciplining incumbents, is to reward merit. And by merit, I mean the merit of young firms who have value that they can add, but they're being held back by a myriad range of business regulations and other constraints, both locally and nationally. So I think both thinking about disciplining incumbents and rewarding merit should be part of the structural issues that accompany Ukrainian policymakers as they grapple with short-term issues.
One thing I know that Ukraine is very keen on is to position its capacity, its assets, its endowments for global competitiveness. What, in your view, could Ukrainian firms offer in a global competitive landscape? And how does Ukraine prepare its talent? You refer to human capital, for example, and do labor market type reforms to make sure that they also have the talent of the future?
Sana, that's a great question. When we look at the data over the last 10 years, a striking fact emerges. A lot of technical folks, whether they are scientists or the engineers, they have left the country. And so a part and parcel of what needs to be done is to reconnect with this talented diaspora so that the ideas, and with ideas come the finance and the know-how, they can really come and leverage back with Ukrainian firms. That's one way Ukrainian firms can improve their managerial capabilities, their technical capabilities. But it won't do just by looking inside. They have to actively cultivate the diaspora. The second question that you said about labor markets, the issue is about the dispersion of this knowledge base of the economy. So we need to think about a way we can develop a technical hub for the country, which not only has kind of knowledge exchanges, but also financial exchanges that connect directly with industry. And how do we maximize the spillovers between knowledge that's created and performance of the firms? But we have always had these debates whether the next generation of Ukrainian businesses should be supported to follow structures of the past or to think about new economic structures. But I think from the research we have done, it's very clear that the new economic model that uses creative destruction, innovation, and productivity is likely to be much more valuable than going back to the economy of the past.
So interesting. It reminds me, just as a parenthesis, of a discussion I had in another ECA country I visited recently with a fintech company. And they were successful very rapidly by growing a customer base. And I said, how did you do it so quickly? You went from, a few 100,000 customers to 20 million customers. And the business owner who started this company said, there was one pivotal ingredient. I had no state-owned enterprise in my field. So it was greenfield in a way. And it deals a bit with your discussion around incumbency and how do you deal with the past history and what Ukraine's economy has been within the past, and how do you need to not leave that, but you really need to innovate for the future. Asad, we've been working so closely with Ukraine to think through the future path and the economy of the future. What are the key steps, key actions Ukraine needs to take to think about its economy for the future, and how are we as the World Bank Group helping them the most?
The people of Ukraine have suffered a lot, and the human capital has also been depleted. How can we build that, and how can we actually promote the reintegration of soldiers who might be coming back, of migrants, both internal and those who have gone abroad, because several million people have left the country. How can we actually bring them all back to create a more inclusive and a dynamic economy? But then the world has changed in many countries. We have actually worked on developing housing markets, bringing in private finance, and supporting a revitalized and a market-oriented housing sector. And I think that's an area in which we could help the Ukrainians in laying out the building blocks for how we're actually developing a market-based housing sector. But none of this will be possible unless there is a new social contract. So this new economy that you were talking of, and the new Ukraine that I know that the authorities are very keen on developing their vision, that new economy has to be built upon a new contract between the citizens, the state, and the international community on what needs to be done and what the role of the different actors would be, what the rights and obligations would be. Going back to the history of the World Bank, actually, so I think we can bring all that knowledge, and plus the expert support and implementation support for the government in this endeavor.
That's excellent. I'm going to throw in one more question for you, because I know it's on their mind and on our mind, and of course it's also part of the Ukraine of the future. How do we work in the context of Ukraine's aspiration to become an EU member? How does that impact our work economically and analytically, but even operationally?
So a lot of the requirements and the needs for Ukraine to get into EU actually requires the establishment of these institutions for the market economy, but also the institutions for more effective public, for the public sector with good governance and accountability and control and fight against corruption. I think we helped so many countries in Eastern Europe also as they were acceding to the EU, and I think that's another area where we can help. But I think it's a great opportunity for Ukraine to actually have a very clear line of sight and an anchor for the future reforms that are needed.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so very much. And thank you for tuning in. And here's really my take. Shaping Ukraine's future economy requires more than just addressing immediate challenges. It means laying the groundwork for the economy of tomorrow, one that will fuel recovery, drive growth, and build long-term resilience. We know that reforms will pay dividends. Now is the time for the economy to grow. Creating jobs, including by leveraging digitalization and AI in particular, is the best way to restore livelihoods and hope in Ukraine. In times of crisis, jobs are still the answer. And this is what the Ukraine Recovery Conference this week in Rome is about. Identifying opportunities today and preparing for tomorrow and the day after. The World Bank Group is ready to work with partners to support Ukraine in unlocking new sources of growth and advancing the reform agenda. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Talking Development.